What you're about to hear might be the most important warning you receive this year. Right now, as you watch this video, something deeply disturbing is happening beneath Yellowstone National Park. The supervolcano that lies dormant under one of America's most beloved natural treasures is showing signs of activity that scientists have never documented before. In the past 72 hours, seismographs have recorded over 300 small earthquakes in the Yellowstone region. 300 in 3 days. The ground in certain areas has risen by more than 6 inches. Thermal features that have been stable for decades are suddenly changing behavior. Geysers are erupting at irregular intervals. Hot springs are boiling more violently than ever recorded. And the scientists who monitor Yellowstone 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, they're using language that should terrify you. Words like unprecedented, accelerating, and most chilling of all, we're running out of time. I'm about to show you evidence that the mainstream media isn't covering. Data that's being discussed in emergency government meetings but not shared with the public. And information that raises a question nobody wants to ask. Is Yellowstone about to erupt? Stay with me. Because if Yellowstone goes, it won't just affect the people near the park. It will change life as we know it across the entire North American continent and potentially the entire world. Let's start with what's happening right now, at this very moment. Over the past week, the Yellowstone Volcano Observatory has detected what geologists are calling significant unrest. That's their technical term. But when you dig into what that actually means, it's terrifying. The earthquake swarms we're seeing aren't normal. Yellowstone always has some seismic activity. It's one of the most geologically active places on Earth. But what's happening now is different. Dr. Michael Torres, the lead volcanologist at the USGS Yellowstone Observatory, held an emergency press conference 3 days ago. His exact words were, "The pattern of seismic activity we're observing does not match anything in our historical record for this caldera. The earthquakes are getting stronger, more frequent, and they're migrating in a way that suggests magma movement beneath the surface." Magma movement beneath the surface? In plain English? The molten rock underground is shifting, and when magma moves, it often means pressure is building. And when pressure builds in a volcano, eventually something has to give. But it's not just earthquakes. The ground itself is changing. GPS monitoring stations positioned throughout the park have detected rapid ground deformation. In certain areas, the land has risen more than 6 inches in just the past month. 6 inches might not sound like much, but in geological terms, that's incredibly fast. One monitoring station near Norris Geyser Basin recorded an uplift of 8 inches in 10 days. 8 inches in 10 days. That's faster than any uplift event recorded at Yellowstone in the past 30 years. Dr. Sarah Chen, a geophysicist who has studied Yellowstone for over 20 years, told colleagues in a leaked email, "What we're seeing suggests a significant volume of magma is rising toward the surface. I cannot state with certainty that an eruption is imminent, but the indicators are more concerning than I've ever witnessed in my career." Cannot state with certainty that an eruption is imminent. That's scientist speak for "I'm really worried, but I can't prove it yet." The thermal features are changing too. Old Faithful, the iconic geyser that erupts with clockwork regularity, has started behaving erratically. For over 100 years, you could set your watch by Old Faithful. It would erupt approximately every 90 minutes, give or take 10 minutes. In the past 2 weeks, that interval has become unpredictable. Sometimes it erupts after 60 minutes, sometimes after 2 hours. And the eruptions themselves are different, higher, more violent, lasting longer than normal. Park rangers have noticed something else disturbing. Several thermal pools that have always been clear blue are turning cloudy and brown. The water temperature in some pools has increased by 15 to 20 degrees Fahrenheit in just days. In the mud volcano area, hydrogen sulfide emissions have increased so dramatically that park officials have closed certain trails. The smell of sulfur, that rotten egg smell, is so strong that visitors were getting headaches and nausea. One park ranger who asked not to be named said, "I've worked here for 18 years. I know every thermal feature in this park like I know my own backyard. What's happening now isn't normal. Things that haven't changed in my entire career are changing week to week, sometimes day to day, Animals are behaving strangely too. Bison herds that normally graze in certain areas have moved away from thermal regions. Elk populations have migrated earlier than usual. Park biologists have documented unusual bird behavior, with some species abandoning nests in areas near active thermal features. Animals often sense geological changes before humans do. They detect subtle shifts in the ground, changes in gas emissions, variations in the Earth's magnetic field. When animals start leaving an area, it's worth paying attention. To understand why what's happening now is so alarming, you need to understand Yellowstone's history. And that history is absolutely terrifying. Yellowstone isn't just a volcano. It's a supervolcano. There's a critical difference. A regular volcano is a mountain with a vent that releases magma. A supervolcano is an enormous chamber of molten rock beneath the Earth's surface, so large that when it erupts, the ground doesn't build up into a mountain. Instead, it collapses inward, creating a massive crater called a caldera. The Yellowstone caldera is 34 miles wide and 45 miles long. The magma chamber beneath it is estimated to be 2,500 cubic miles in volume. To put that in perspective, if you could somehow extract all that magma and spread it evenly across the entire state of Texas, it would bury the state under 14 feet of molten rock. That's not a volcano. That's a geological monster. Yellowstone has had 3 major eruptions in its history. The first was 2.1 million years ago. The second was 1.3 million years ago. The third was 640,000 years ago. Notice the pattern. Roughly every 600,000 to 700,000 years. And the last eruption was 640,000 years ago, which means statistically we're overdue. Now, before you panic, scientists are quick to point out that volcanoes don't operate on strict schedules. Just because the average interval is 600,000 years doesn't mean an eruption is automatically imminent. But it does mean Yellowstone could erupt, and geologically speaking, it could erupt at any time. Let's talk about what happened during those previous eruptions. The most recent one, 640,000 years ago, ejected 240 cubic miles of rock, ash, and debris into the atmosphere. That's 240 cubic miles. The eruption of Mount St. Helens in 1980, which killed 57 people and is considered one of the most destructive volcanic events in U.S. history, ejected less than 1 cubic mile of material. Yellowstone ejected 240 times that amount, and that wasn't even Yellowstone's largest eruption. The eruption 2.1 miles. Leon years ago was twice as powerful. It ejected over 600 cubic miles of material. Ash from that eruption has been found as far away as California, Louisiana, and Iowa. Essentially, it blanketed the entire western half of North America. If that happened today, the consequences would be beyond catastrophic. Every major city west of the Mississippi would be buried under feet of ash. Air traffic would cease. Agriculture would collapse. Infrastructure would fail. Dr. Robert Christensen, a geologist who has studied Yellowstone for over 40 years, describes it this way. A Yellowstone super eruption would be an extinction-level event for modern civilization in North America. Not for humanity as a species, but for our technological society as we know it. Extinction-level event for modern civilization. Let that phrase sink in for a moment. So what causes these massive eruptions? What's happening beneath Yellowstone right now? Deep underground, about 4 to 6 miles below the surface, there's a massive chamber filled with partially molten rock called magma. This magma is incredibly hot, reaching temperatures over 1,400 degrees Fahrenheit. The magma chamber is fed by a deep plume of hot material rising from hundreds of miles below, near the boundary between Earth's mantle and core. This plume is like a blowtorch pointed at the underside of North America, continuously pumping heat and molten rock upward. As the magma heats up, it expands. As it expands, it pushes upward against heat rock above it. This creates pressure, immense pressure. Think of it like a pressure cooker. As long as the lid stays on and the pressure can be released gradually through the valve, everything is fine. But if the pressure builds too high, too fast, eventually the lid blows off. At Yellowstone, the pressure valve is the network of geysers, hot springs, and fumaroles. These thermal features allow heat and gases to escape gradually, releasing pressure bit by bit. But if magma rises too quickly, or if the amount of magma increases beyond what the thermal features can vent, pressure builds. And if that pressure reaches a critical point, the rock above the magma chamber fractures. When that happens, the magma erupts violently to the surface. That's what happened 640,000 years ago. That's what happened 1.3 million years ago. And that's what could happen again. Scientists monitor several key indicators to assess the risk of eruption: earthquake activity, ground deformation, gas emissions, thermal changes. And right now, all four of these indicators are showing concerning trends. Dr. Chen, the geophysicist I mentioned earlier, explains it this way. Individually, each of these signals might not be cause for major alarm. We see variations all the time at Yellowstone. But when all four indicators start trending upwards simultaneously, and when the rate of change accelerates, that's when we start to get very concerned. All four indicators trending upwards simultaneously. And accelera. Ting. Another scientist, Dr. Jacob Smith from the University of Utah, added this chilling observation. Our computer models suggest that the magma chamber may have received a significant injection of new magma from the deep plume below. This would explain the seismic activity, the ground uplift, and the changes in thermal features. But it also means we're dealing with a dynamic, evolving situation that could change rapidly. A dynamic, evolving situation that could change rapidly. Translation: things could go from concerning to catastrophic very quickly. Let me show you what's been happening on the ground over the past few weeks. The evidence that something significant is underway. 2 weeks ago, a section of boardwalk in the Upper Geyser Basin collapsed, not because of structural failure, but because the ground beneath it had become so hot that the wooden supports caught fire underground and burned away. Park officials closed the area immediately. When engineers examined the site, they found that soil temperatures just 6 inches below the surface were over 400 degrees Fahrenheit. Hot enough to ignite wood, hot enough to cause severe burns on contact. That boardwalk had been there for 12 years without issues. Suddenly, in a matter of days, the ground became too hot to support the structure. In the Norris Geyser Basin, a new thermal feature appeared overnight. Rangers arrived one morning to find steam venting from a crack in the ground that hadn't been there the day before. Within 24 hours, that crack had widened to 3 feet across and was ejecting steam and boiling water 15 feet into the air. New thermal features can form at Yellowstone. That's not unprecedented, but the speed at which this one formed and intensified has geologists deeply concerned. It suggests that magma or superheated water is very close to the surface in that area. Perhaps most disturbing are the gas emissions. Scientists regularly measure the amount and composition of gases being released at Yellowstone. Recently, they've detected significant increases in carbon dioxide and sulfur dioxide. These gases come from magma. When magma contains dissolved gases, as pressure decreases and the magma rises toward the surface, those gases are released. Similar to how bubbles form when you open a carbonated drink, increased gas emissions often indicate that magma is rising and degassing, and the rate of increase at Yellowstone has accelerated dramatically in the past month. Dr. Torres, the USGS volcanologist, stated in an internal memo that was leaked to the press, CO2 flux from Yellowstone Lake has increased by 300% over baseline levels. Governments would collapse. Wars would likely break out over remaining resources. The global death toll could reach into the hundreds of millions, not from the eruption itself, but from the cascading consequences. Dr. Michael Rampino, a volcanologist at New York University who studies the global effects of supereruptions, puts it bluntly: a Yellowstone supereruption would be the most severe natural disaster in recorded human history. It would make every earthquake, hurricane, and tsunami we've experienced look minor by comparison. The direct effects would be catastrophic. The indirect effects could threaten the survival of modern civilization. The survival of modern civilization. Now, I need to be clear about something. Most scientists do not believe that Yellowstone is about to have a super eruption tomorrow or next week, or even necessarily in the next few years. The probability of a major eruption in any given year is estimated at about 1 in 730,000. Those are long odds, but here's the thing. Probability doesn't mean impossibility. And the signs we're seeing now, the earthquake swarms, the ground deformation, the thermal changes, the gas emissions, are all consistent with what you would expect to see before an eruption. Dr. Torres, when pressed by reporters, admitted, "We cannot rule out a significant eruptive event in the near to medium term. The system is clearly in a state of unrest. Whether that unrest leads to an eruption, and if so, what kind of eruption, we simply cannot say with certainty, cannot rule out, cannot say with certainty." That's as close to a warning as scientists can ethically give without causing panic. Some scientists are more blunt privately than they are publicly. One geophysicist, speaking on condition of anonymity, told a journalist, "Look, publicly we have to be measured and careful. We can't scream the sky is falling every time Yellowstone burps, but privately, a lot of us are more concerned than we've ever been. The data we're seeing doesn't fit comfortable patterns. It suggests something big might be building." Another scientist, also speaking anonymously, said, "My family lives in Colorado. I've quietly suggested they consider having an evacuation plan, not because I think an eruption is imminent, but because the risk is no longer negligible. It's gone from not something to worry about to something that could actually happen." These are the people who study Yellowstone for a living, and they're quietly making contingency plans for their own families. Let's talk about the human side of this. The people who would be directly affected if Yellowstone erupts. Over 4 million people visit Yellowstone National Park every year. During peak summer months, there can be 30 to 40,000 people inside the park on any given day. If an eruption occurred without warning, many of those people would have no chance of escape. The park would become a death trap. Even if there is warning, evacuating the park quickly is logistically challenging. There are only a few roads in and out. If everyone tried to leave at once, traffic would gridlock. People would be stuck. Park officials have evacuation plans, but they acknowledge these plans are designed for situations like wildfires or severe storms, not volcanic eruptions. The speed and scale of a volcanic event would overwhelm their capacity to respond. Then there are the hundreds of thousands of people who live in the potential ashfall zone. Cities like Billings, Boise, and Salt Lake City. How do you evacuate entire cities? Where do people go? Who coordinates that? FEMA has disaster plans for Yellowstone, but even they admit the plans are inadequate. One FEMA official in congressional testimony last year stated, "Our current disaster response framework is not designed to handle an event of this magnitude. We simply do not have the resources or infrastructure to evacuate and support tens of millions of displaced persons simultaneously." Think about that. The agency responsible for disaster response is essentially saying they couldn't handle it. Individual families are left to make their own plans, but most people don't know where to start. Do you stockpile supplies? Do you have an evacuation route planned? Do you keep your gas tank full at all times? One mother in Bozeman, Montana, about 90 miles from Yellowstone, told a reporter, "I lie awake at night thinking about this. If Yellowstone blows, we might have minutes to get out, maybe hours if we're lucky. I have 2 young kids. How do I protect them from something like that? We have a go bag packed, but is that enough? Where would we even go?" Another resident, a retired teacher in Idaho Falls, said, "I spent my whole life here. This is my home. But I'm starting to think about leaving. Not because I think an eruption is definitely coming, but because I'm not sure I want to live with this hanging over my head. It's like living next to a ticking time bomb that might never go off or might go off tomorrow." The psychological toll of living near a supervolcano that's showing signs of unrest is real. People are stressed, anxious, uncertain, and there's no clear guidance on what to do. Government officials are caught in an impossible position. If they downplay the risk and something happens, they'll be blamed for not warning people. If they raise alarms and nothing happens, they'll be accused of fear-mongering and causing unnecessary panic and economic damage, so they walk a tightrope, issuing carefully worded statements that acknowledge the situation without sounding too alarming. But careful language doesn't help people make informed decisions about their safety. So where does this leave us? Yellowstone is showing signs of significant volcanic unrest. The earthquake, swarms, ground deformation, thermal changes, and gas emissions are all real, documented, and concerning to the scientists who monitor the volcano. Does this mean an eruption is imminent? No, not necessarily. Yellowstone has had periods of unrest before that didn't lead to eruptions. The system could settle down. The magma that's currently rising could stall and solidify underground. The pressure could dissipate through increased thermal activity without a major eruption, but it could also continue to escalate. The unrest could intensify, and if it does, we could be facing a volcanic event unlike anything modern civilization has ever experienced. The question isn't whether Yellowstone can erupt. We know it can. The question is whether it will erupt soon. And nobody, not even the world's leading experts, can answer that question with certainty. Dr. Torres, in his most recent public statement, said, "We are monitoring the situation 24/7. We have the best equipment, the best scientists, and the most comprehensive data set ever assembled for a volcanic system. But volcanoes are inherently unpredictable. We cannot tell you with confidence whether Yellowstone will erupt next week, next year, or not for another 1,000 years. What we can tell you is that the current unrest warrants serious attention and continued vigilance." Dr. Chen added, "The most responsible thing we can do is be honest about what we know and what we don't know. We know the system is showing unusual activity. We know that similar patterns at other volcanoes have sometimes preceded eruptions. We don't know if Yellowstone will follow that same pattern. All we can do is watch, measure, analyze, and be prepared for whatever comes." Some scientists believe we need a much larger public awareness campaign, that people have a right to know the full extent of the risk so they can make informed decisions about where they live and how they prepare. Others worry that too much information would cause panic, economic collapse in the region, and unnecessary suffering if an eruption doesn't occur. It's a difficult balance. But here's what's undeniable. Yellowstone is not sleeping peacefully. Something is happening beneath the surface. And the people who have dedicated their lives to understanding volcanoes are more concerned than they've been in their entire careers. This isn't just a regional issue. It's not just a concern for Wyoming, Montana, and Idaho. If Yellowstone erupts on a large scale, it will affect every person in North America and potentially every person on Earth. The supervolcano beneath Yellowstone has erupted before. It will erupt again. That's not speculation, it's geological fact. The only question is when, and right now the warning signs are stronger than they've been in modern history. If you found this information valuable, hit that subscribe button. Share this video with people who need to know. Because this isn't fear-mongering, it's not sensationalism. It's documented scientific fact presented by experts who study this system every single day.